The man who was arrested for a crime that hadn't happened. In February of 1968, a man named Harold Bennett was arrested for murder. He didn't resist. He didn't argue. He was mostly confused. Harold was a 42-year-old maintenance supervisor, married, no criminal record, no history of violence. He had just finished dinner and was reading the newspaper when two police officers knocked on his door. They asked him to step outside. They said he was under arrest for the murder of a man named Harold Bennett. At first, everyone assumed it was a mistake, a paperwork error, a name mix-up. But when Harold asked who the victim was, one of the officers looked at him and said, "You." At the station, Harold was fingerprinted and photographed. The booking officer hesitated when entering the details. The form already existed. Same name, same birth date, same address. The charge read, homicide, victim, deceased. Time of death, 6 days in the future. Harold laughed at first. Then he stopped. The arresting officers didn't look confused. They looked uncomfortable. They told him they'd received the warrant that afternoon. Signed, approved, properly filed. There was no indication it was unusual, except for one detail. The case file included a description of the crime scene, and it was specific. According to the report, Harold Bennett would be found dead in his garage. Cause of death? Blunt force trauma to the head. The weapon? A claw hammer. The report noted there were no signs of forced entry. It also listed items found at the scene: a dropped flashlight, a set of keys near the body, and a watch stopped at 9:42 p.m. Harold owned a flashlight. He owned a hammer, and the watch described in the report was on his wrist as he sat in the holding cell. A supervisor was called. Then another. The police department had no protocol for arresting someone who wasn't dead yet. After several hours, Harold was released. The official reason given was clerical error. The paperwork, they said, would be corrected. Before he left, Harold asked one final question. Who killed me? No one answered. For the next 6 days, Harold didn't sleep. He avoided his garage. He stayed inside after dark. He unplugged every tool he owned. He told his wife what had happened. She laughed until she saw the paperwork. The arrest record was real. The mugshot was real. And when they called the police department, no one could find the file. It was gone, as if it had never existed. On the 6th night, Harold woke to a noise in the house. Not a crash, not a shout, just a sound that didn't belong. He grabbed a flashlight and went to check the garage. Later, investigators would note that the flashlight was found on the floor near the door. They would also note there were no signs of forced entry. At 9:42 p.m., a neighbor reported hearing a dull impact. No one called the police. Harold Bennett was found dead the next morning, in his garage. Cause of death? Blunt force trauma to the head. The weapon was never recovered. When officers reviewed the case, something unsettling surfaced. The arrest record had returned, fully intact, time-stamped 6 days earlier, filed, approved, closed. In the system, the sequence made perfect sense. First, the arrest, then the death. The only inconsistency was that Harold had been alive in between. The case was ruled an unsolved homicide. No suspect was ever named. No explanation was offered for the arrest record, and no one involved in the original booking was willing to speak about it. One retired officer later said only this: sometimes the paperwork arrives early. And somewhere in the records department, archived and untouched, is a completed file that proves something unsettling, that at least once, the system didn't predict a crime. It remembered it before it happened. This is Oddbox, and that story actually happened.